Mira Evans never felt welcome in the grand Sullivan mansion. The hallways whispered secrets, and the family portraits on the walls seemed to glare at her like she didn't belong. But after her cold, powerful mother-in-law died, Mira was given a strange demand in the will. She must move into the mansion and finish a mysterious portrait hidden in the attic. If she refuses, the entire family loses their fortune. But as Mira begins to paint, strange things start happening. Locked doors open by themselves, hidden letters appear, and someone starts watching her at night. What secret was her mother-in-law trying to reveal? Just before we get started, where are you tuning in from today? Coffee shop, kitchen table, curled up in bed? This story's a slow burn mystery with a haunting twist. Tap subscribe so you're first to know how it all unravels. The first time Mira Evans stepped into the Sullivan mansion, she knew she didn't belong. Even now, 5 years into her marriage to Robert Sullivan, the feeling hadn't changed. The marble floors still seemed too cold, the antique furniture too fragile, and the family portraits lining the grand staircase too judgmental. Generations of Sullivan women with their perfect posture and practiced smiles, looking down at the art teacher who'd somehow married the family's only son. "Try not to touch anything valuable," Vivian, Robert's eldest sister, had whispered at that first dinner. This remained their dynamic: Vivian's designer clothes against Myra's department store finds, Eleanor's snide comments about Myra's quaint little teaching job, and Robert's weak defenses that never quite protected his wife. Today, however, was different. Cecilia Sullivan, the family matriarch, was dead. The family gathered in the mansion's oak-paneled library where Mr. Whitman, the family attorney, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Mira sat slightly apart from the others, her hand loosely held in Robert's sweaty palm. "Before I read the will," Mr. Whitman began, "Mrs. Sullivan left a video message to be played at this time." The television screen flickered to life, revealing Cecilia Sullivan's elegant figure seated in this very library. Despite being 78, her back was straight, her silver hair impeccably styled. "My dears," she began, her voice strong despite the illness that had claimed her. "If you're watching this, I've left this world behind. Before my assets are distributed, I have one final request, or rather a stipulation." Vivian leaned forward, her red fingernails tapping impatiently against her knee. "The bulk of my estate will remain in trust for 90 days, Cecilia continued. "During this time, I request that my daughter-in-law, Mira, reside in this house and complete the unfinished portrait in the attic studio. Only upon completion of this task will my estate be distributed according to my wishes." The room erupted in chaos. "This is absurd." Vivian shot to her feet. Mother must have been delirious when she recorded this. Eleanor's normally composed face twisted with anger. "Why, Mira? She's not even a real Sullivan." Robert simply stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open in shock. Mr. Whitman raised his hands. "This stipulation is legally binding. If Mira refuses or fails to complete the portrait within 90 days, the entire estate will go to the Sullivan Foundation for the Arts." All eyes turned to Mira. Her heart hammered in her chest. The attic studio had been Cecilia's sacred space, off-limits to everyone except the old woman herself. Mira had never even seen inside. "Can I have some time to think about it?" Mira asked, her voice barely audible. "No," Vivian snapped. "You'll do it. This family's legacy is at stake." That night, as Mira packed a suitcase in their modest apartment across town, Robert paced anxiously. "I don't understand why Mother would do this," he muttered. "You two barely spoke." Mira carefully folded her painting smock. "That's not entirely true. We talked about art sometimes when you weren't around. You never told me that. You never asked." Mira closed the suitcase. "Besides, your sisters were always there, watching, waiting for me to say something wrong." Robert ran his hands through his hair. 90 days is a long time to be apart. "You could stay at the mansion, too," Mira suggested, though she already knew his answer. "I can't take that much time off work." He didn't meet her eyes. The truth hung between them. He was afraid to stand against his sisters. The next morning, Mira stood in front of the Sullivan mansion, suitcase in hand. The thought of living here alone was terrifying, but something else pulled at her, curiosity about what Cecilia wanted her to find. Mrs. Abernathy, the housekeeper who had served the family for decades, opened the door before Mira could knock. "I've prepared the blue guest room for you," she said, her weathered face unreadable. As Mira followed her through the marbled entryway, Vivian appeared at the top of the stairs. "Just so we're clear," she called down, "this little stunt doesn't make you family. Complete the painting, get your share of the inheritance, and go back to your little life." Mira clutched her suitcase tighter. "I didn't ask for this, Vivian. Yet here you are, ready to cash in." Vivian's smile was sharp as a blade. "I'll be watching you." That afternoon, Mrs. Abernathy led Mira to the attic stairs. "No one's been up there since Mrs. Sullivan fell ill," she explained, producing an old brass key. She was very private about her painting. The key turned with a heavy click. The door swung open to reveal a space transformed by skylights and windows. Easels stood like silent sentinels around the room. Paint-splattered cloths covered furniture, and the walls were lined with canvases facing inward. But it was the large canvas in the center that drew Mira's eye. Partially completed, it showed the beginning of a woman's face emerging from darkness, just the suggestion of eyes that seemed somehow familiar. On a small table beside it lay a sealed envelope with Mira's name, written in elegant script. With trembling fingers, Mira opened it and began to read. "My dear Mira, if you're reading this, I've begun my final journey. You're probably wondering why I've asked this of you. The truth is, we are more alike than you know. Begin the portrait, and all will become clear. The first brushstrokes are always the hardest. Look in the leftmost drawer of my desk. Cecilia." Mira moved to the antique desk and pulled open the drawer. Inside was another envelope and a small key. Outside the attic window, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Somewhere below, she heard a door slam. 90 days suddenly seemed both too long and not nearly enough time to unravel what Cecilia Sullivan wanted her to discover. The morning sunlight streamed through the attic skylights, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air. Mira stood before the unfinished portrait, brush in hand, paralyzed by the blank canvas staring back at her. Working on someone else's painting felt wrong, invasive even, especially when she had no idea what the final image was supposed to be. She opened the second envelope she'd found yesterday. "First lesson, art, like life, requires courage. The painting I need you to complete is not the one before you." That was merely a decoy. "Look behind the bookshelf. There you'll find my true final work." Mira frowned, scanning the room until she spotted a small bookshelf tucked in a corner. She pushed it aside, revealing a hidden alcove containing a much larger canvas covered with a velvet cloth. Her hands trembled as she removed the covering. The unfinished portrait beneath made her gasp. It was a group portrait of the Sullivan family, rendered with remarkable skill. Cecilia sat in the center, surrounded by Robert, Vivian, Eleanor, and several other relatives. But what struck Mira most was that there was an empty space beside Robert, a space that seemed to be waiting for her. At the bottom of the canvas, Cecilia had penciled in these words, "Family Secrets, 2023. What are you doing?" Mira whirled around to find Eleanor standing in the doorway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I was just getting started," Mira stammered. Eleanor strode into the room, her eyes cold as she surveyed the hidden portrait. Mother never mentioned she was painting the family. Her gaze shifted to Mira. "How convenient that she's left a space for you." "I didn't ask for this, Eleanor." "No? Then why did Mother choose you?" Eleanor ran her finger along the edge of the canvas. "You've been here 5 years, and suddenly you're her artistic heir. It doesn't make sense." Before Mira could respond, Eleanor's phone buzzed. "The estate assessor is here." "I'm watching you, Mira." "We all are." She turned on her heel and left. Alone again, Mira spotted another envelope taped to the back of the canvas. The Sullivans have always valued appearances above all else. But beneath the perfect family portrait lies a different truth. In my desk, I've left you my journals. Read them. You'll need to understand to complete this painting properly. In the mahogany desk, Mira found a stack of leather-bound journals. Opening the earliest one, dated 40 years ago, she began to read. "Today I became a Sullivan bride. Edward's family watched me like hawks during the ceremony, especially his mother. Remember, she told me. A Sullivan wife is seen, not heard. I already feel like a bird in a gilded cage. Mira read for hours, discovering that Cecilia had once been exactly what she was now, an outsider. The young Cecilia had been a talented artist from a middle-class family who'd fallen in love with Edward Sullivan, heir to the Sullivan fortune. His family had treated her with the same thinly veiled contempt that Mira experienced now. A knock at the door interrupted her reading. Mrs. Abernathy entered with a tray of tea. "You found her journals, I see," the housekeeper said quietly. "Did you know what they contain?" Mira asked. Mrs. Abernathy nodded. "I've been here since before Mrs. Sullivan arrived as a bride. I watched what this family did to her." She poured the tea carefully. She changed over the years, hardened. But she never forgot what it felt like to be the outsider. Why didn't she ever tell me we had this in common? The Sullivans have eyes and ears everywhere. Mrs. Abernathy glanced meaningfully at the door. "But she watched you. She saw how they treated you, especially after." "After what?" The housekeeper hesitated. "After you lost the baby last year. The way they acted like it was somehow your failure." Mrs. Sullivan was furious. Myra's hand flew to her stomach, the phantom pain of her miscarriage still fresh. The Sullivans had indeed treated it like an inconvenience, a disappointment rather than a tragedy. "There's something else you should know." Mrs. Abernathy lowered her voice. "The night before Mrs. Sullivan died, she was perfectly fine. Dr. Reynolds had just given her a good report. Then suddenly she was gone. It never sat right with me." Mira felt a chill. "Are you suggesting she didn't die naturally?" Mrs. Abernathy straightened up. "I'm not suggesting anything. Just keep your eyes open." That night, Mira began sketching on a canvas, adding details to the family portrait. As she worked, she noticed something odd, tiny marks in the background of the painting, almost like a code or pattern. She would need more time to decipher it. Heading to her bedroom after midnight, Mira froze at the sound of voices coming from the library below. "This is taking too long," Vivian was saying. "Who knows what Mother told her?" "Patience," came Eleanor's reply. "We need to be careful. If she finds the—" The conversation stopped abruptly. Mira pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. Footsteps approached, then receded down another hallway. Back in her room, Mira locked the door and pushed a chair against it. She couldn't shake the feeling that this portrait was more than just a final wish. It was a message, and someone in this house didn't want it delivered. On her pillow lay a note that hadn't been there earlier. "Leave now if you know what's good for you. The painting isn't worth your life." Myra's hand shook as she set the note aside. Someone had been in her room. Someone was watching her. And for the first time, she wondered if completing this portrait might actually be dangerous. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky as rain began to fall, pattering against the windows like warning fingers. In the dim light, the Sullivan family portraits seemed to watch her with newfound menace. 1 week into her stay, Mira established a routine. Mornings were spent painting, afternoons reading Cecilia's journals, and evenings avoiding the sisters who seemed to materialize whenever she left the attic. She'd taken to keeping the door locked and had even installed a simple alarm, a string of bells across the entrance that would sound if anyone entered while she was away. Today's journal entry had been particularly revealing. "Edward's sisters have never forgiven me for the changes I've made to this house. They believe I've tainted their precious legacy. Little do they know how much of their legacy was built on lies and stolen art." The painting in the east parlor alone could unravel everything they believe about their grandfather. Mira carefully noted this detail. Each journal revealed more about the cracks in the Sullivan family facade, financial troubles hidden from the public, marriages of convenience, and artwork of questionable provenance that had built their fortune. As she worked on the portrait, adding layers and depth to the family figures, Mira incorporated subtle elements from these revelations, a particular painting visible in the background, the slight tension in Cecilia's hands, the shadows beneath Vivian's eyes suggesting her mounting debts. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. "It's Mrs. Abernathy," called a familiar voice. Mira unlocked the door to find the housekeeper holding a dusty box. "I found this while cleaning Mrs. Sullivan's bedroom closet," she explained. It was hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside the box were medical records, bank statements, and a flash drive. "Have you looked at these?" Mira asked. "It's not my place," Mrs. Abernathy replied, though her expression suggested she knew more than she was saying. "But Mrs. Sullivan trusted you. Perhaps this is why." After the housekeeper left, Mira plugged the flash drive into her laptop. It contained dozens of photos, surveillance images of Vivian meeting with men in expensive suits, Eleanor arguing with Cecilia, and financial documents showing massive withdrawals from the family accounts. Among the files was a video dated 3 days before Cecilia's death. With trembling fingers, Mira pressed play. On screen, Cecilia appeared in her bedroom, speaking directly to the camera. "If anything happens to me, this is my insurance. Yesterday, I changed my will. Vivian and Eleanor know this, and they're not happy. I've told them I'm reducing their inheritance due to their reckless spending. The truth is, I no longer trust my own daughters." Mira sat back stunned. Could one of the sisters have? The thought was too horrible to finish. The sudden noise downstairs made her quickly pocket the flash drive. She needed somewhere safer to review the remaining files. That evening at dinner, a tense affair she was required to attend weekly, Mira studied the sisters with new eyes. "How's the mysterious painting coming along?" Eleanor asked, cutting her meat with precise movements. Slowly, Mira replied, "There's a lot to interpret. Mother was an adequate hobbyist at best," Vivian dismissed. "I can't imagine there's much depth to interpret." Robert cleared his throat. "Mother was actually quite talented. She studied art in Paris before meeting Father." Vivian's smile tightened. "Ancient history. What matters is finishing this ridiculous task so we can all move on." She fixed Mira with a pointed stare. 90 days is the deadline. Not a day more." "Speaking of deadlines," Mira said carefully, "did your mother mention changing her will shortly before she died?" The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor's fork clattered against her plate. "Where did you hear that?" Vivian finally asked, her voice dangerously soft. "Mr. Whitman mentioned it." Mira lied, watching their reactions. Mother was confused toward the end. Eleanor interjected quickly. "The medication affected her judgment." "That's not what Dr. Reynolds said," Mira countered. According to her medical records, her mind was quite clear. Robert looked between them, confusion evident. "What's going on? Why does this matter?" "It doesn't," Vivian snapped. "Mira is trying to create drama where none exists." She stood abruptly. "I've lost my appetite." Later that night, Mira confided in Robert about her suspicions. "That's absurd," he said, pacing their bedroom. "My sisters may be difficult, but they're not murderers." Then explained the surveillance photos, the changed will, the threatening note I received. "What note?" Robert demanded. Mira showed him the warning left on her pillow. This could be from anyone, he argued, but she could see doubt creeping into his expression. "Why would Mother involve you in all this?" "Because I'm the only one without a stake in the inheritance," Mira realized. "I'm the only one she could trust." Robert ran his hands through his hair. "This is crazy. I need time to think." He moved toward the door. "Where are you going?" "To get some air." After he left, Mira returned to the attic. She needed to work, to think. As she approached the portrait, she noticed something immediately wrong. Someone had been there. The canvas had been moved slightly, and one of Cecilia's journals was out of place. A chill ran down her spine as she carefully examined the painting. There, in the corner, nearly invisible unless you were looking for it, was a fingerprint in still wet paint. Someone had touched her work, and recently. Mira quickly gathered the journals and flash drive, searching for a new hiding place. As she moved Cecilia's desk, she noticed a loose floorboard. Underneath was a small metal box containing a final letter. "Mira, if you're reading this, you've discovered that my death may not have been natural. The portrait is not just art, it's evidence. What you're painting will reveal the truth about this family and about my death. Trust no one, not even Robert. Finish the painting. It's your only protection now." The attic suddenly felt exposed. Mira gathered her essential materials and relocated to her bedroom, locking the door behind her. She pushed the heavy dresser against it for good measure. Outside, she heard footsteps pass by her door, pausing briefly before continuing down the hall. Mira held her breath, waiting in the darkness, the weight of Cecilia's final message pressing down on her. She was no longer just painting a portrait. She was solving a murder. And someone in this house was watching her every move. On the 30th day of her stay, Mira woke to the sound of Ray's voices coming from downstairs. She crept to the landing and listened. "This has gone far enough," Robert was saying, his voice unusually firm. "Mira, show me the note. Someone is threatening my wife." "Oh, please," came Vivian's dismissive tone. "She probably wrote it herself for attention. Why would she do that?" "Because she's trying to turn you against us," Eleanor chimed in. "Just like Mother tried to do at the end." Mira leaned closer, straining to hear. "Mother was in her right mind," Robert insisted. "Dr. Reynolds confirmed it." "Dr. Reynolds doesn't know everything," Vivian snapped. "Mother was paranoid and delusional. Why else would she force us through this ridiculous portrait charade?" The conversation shifted to whispers Mira couldn't make out. She retreated to the attic, her temporary sanctuary, despite knowing someone had been inside. The portrait was taking shape now, the family members rendered in precise detail, but with subtle clues hidden throughout. A pill bottle reflected in a mirror. Documents visible on a desk showing the Sullivan Foundation's financial troubles. The slight discoloration on Cecilia's hand where an 4 had been. Mira had also discovered what the strange marks in the background of the painting were meant to be coordinates. Latitude and longitude numbers subtly worked into the pattern of the wallpaper. She looked them up and found they pointed to a location in Switzerland. Bank, perhaps? Another piece of the puzzle. A knock at the door startled her. "It's Robert." She let him in, noting the dark circles under his eyes. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began. "About Mother's death not being natural." Mira waited, brush still in hand. "I called Dr. Reynolds this morning. He said—" Robert swallowed hard. "He said there were some unusual test results he'd flagged for further investigation, but then Mother died before they could be completed. The family declined an autopsy." "Who made that decision?" "Vivian. She said Mother wouldn't have wanted it." Robert sank into a chair. "I should have questioned it." "It's not too late," Mira said gently. "We can request one now." "After a month?" Robert shook his head. "Besides, she was cremated. Vivian arranged it immediately." Of course she did, Mira thought. "Robert, I need to show you something." She revealed the flash drive and Cecilia's final letter. As Robert read, his face drained of color. "This can't be real," he whispered. "My own sisters wouldn't. The inheritance is substantial," Mira reminded him. "And according to your mother's journals, both Vivian and Eleanor are deeply in debt. What do we do?" "I need to finish the painting," Mira said. "Your mother believed it would somehow reveal the truth. I think she encoded evidence in the composition, things only someone with an artist eye would notice." "You can't stay here," Robert insisted. "It's not safe. If I leave, we may never know what happened. Besides, the inheritance. I don't care about the money." "But they do," Mira countered. "And right now, this painting is the only leverage we have." That night, a violent storm hit the coast. Rain lashed against the windows as thunder shook the old mansion. Mira worked late into the night, adding crucial details to the portrait. She relocated the most incriminating journals to a safe deposit box in town, but kept photographing pages that might be relevant to the painting. A flash of lightning illuminated the attic, followed by darkness. The power had gone out. Mira set down her brush, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was. She fumbled for her phone's flashlight and made her way toward the door. Behind her, something crashed. Mira spun around, heart racing. In the beam of her flashlight, she saw a figure dressed in black, face obscured, standing near the portrait. "Who's there?" she demanded, voice shaking. The figure lunged, not at her, but at the painting, a knife glinting in the darkness. Mira screamed and threw herself forward, grabbing the intruder's arm. They struggled, knocking over an easel. The knife slashed downward, cutting Myra's forearm before clattering to the floor. Mira scrambled back, clutching her bleeding arm as the figure rushed past her and disappeared down the stairs. Moments later, footsteps thundered up the staircase. Robert burst in, followed by Mrs. Abernathy. "Someone attacked me," Mira gasped. "They tried to destroy the painting." Mrs. Abernathy examined Myra's arm. "This needs stitches." "Where are my sisters?" Robert demanded. "Miss Vivian is in the library," Mrs. Abernathy replied. "Miss Eleanor said she was going to bed early." While Robert called the police, Mrs. Abernathy bandaged Myra's arm and examined the painting. "They didn't damage it," she observed. "You stopped them in time." Mira nodded, still shaking. "This proves we're on the right track. The painting threatened someone in this house." The local police arrived but found little evidence. With no security cameras in the attic and everyone denying involvement, there was nothing to do but file a report. The officer suggested it might have been an attempted burglary, despite Myra's insistence that the intruder had specifically targeted the painting. After they left, Robert insisted on staying in the attic with Mira while she worked. "I won't let you out of my sight," he promised. For the first time in their marriage, Mira saw Robert standing firmly against his family's influence. She wondered if this was what Cecilia had intended all along, not just to expose her killer, but to help Robert find his courage. As dawn broke, Mira made a startling discovery in one of Cecilia's last journal entries. "I've confirmed my suspicions about the pills. They've been tampered with. I've replaced them with placebos and kept samples of the originals. They're hidden where only an artist would think to look, in plain sight." Myra's eyes widened as understanding dawned. She turned to the portrait, studying it with fresh eyes. There, in the painting of Cecilia's hand, rested a pill, rendered so realistically it appeared three-dimensional. But unlike the rest of the portrait, this detail was actually textured. Carefully, Mira pressed her finger against it. The pill shifted slightly. "Robert," she whispered, "I think I found something." Together, they gently pried the actual pill from the canvas where Cecilia had embedded it in the paint. "We need to get this tested," Robert said, his voice catching. "If this contains poison, then we'll have proof," Mira finished. "And the painting isn't even complete yet. Who knows what other evidence your mother left behind?" Outside the window, the storm had passed. The first rays of sunshine illuminated the portrait, turning what had been shadowy and ominous into something revealing and clear, just like the truth they were uncovering. But as Mira studied the canvas more carefully, she realized with growing horror that there was still a major clue she'd missed, something that pointed to which sister had actually killed Cecilia Sullivan. The lab results confirmed their worst fears. The pill embedded in the painting contained a lethal dose of digitalis, a heart medication that in excess would mimic natural heart failure, especially in an elderly woman already taking heart medication. Digitalis poisoning, Dr. Lewis explained over the phone. It's not commonly tested for unless specifically requested. The symptoms would appear as heart failure. Mira and Robert sat in the attic, the speakerphone between them, the portrait looming in the background. Would Cecilia have known she was being poisoned? Mira asked. Possibly. Symptoms include vision changes, seeing yellow halos around objects, nausea, confusion. If she was aware of what those symptoms might indicate, she could have realized what was happening. After hanging up, Robert paced the room. "We need to go to the police right now." "With what?" "A pill we claim we found in a painting." "We need more." Mira turned to the portrait. "Your mother knew exactly what she was doing. She left a trail of breadcrumbs, not one single piece of evidence." The portrait was now 3/4 complete. The Sullivan family gazed out from the canvas, Cecilia seated regally in the center, Robert standing behind her, and the sisters on either side. Mira had added herself in the space left for her, standing slightly apart but connected to Robert. The background contained the hidden coordinates and subtle references to family secrets. But as Mira studied it, something still nagged at her. There was a pattern she couldn't quite grasp, something about the positioning of the figures, the way Cecilia's hand pointed slightly toward one side of the canvas. "The journals," she muttered, flipping through them. There must be something else. A passage from one of the final entries caught her eye. Vivian visited today with her new earrings, supposedly a gift from her latest benefactor. I recognized them immediately as my mother's sapphires that disappeared from the safe last month. When confronted, she flew into a rage, accusing me of senility. But I've known for months she's been stealing family heirlooms to pay her gambling debts. The records in my Swiss account prove it all. Mira looked back at the portrait. In it, she had faithfully reproduced Vivian's outfit from a family photo, including sapphire earrings that caught the light in a distinctive way. "It's Vivian," she whispered. "Look at the earrings in the painting. Your mother is literally pointing at them." The Swiss coordinates must lead to bank records proving Vivian was stealing from the family. Robert stared at the canvas, the truth settling heavily on his shoulders. "My own sister is a thief and a murderer. We need to secure the painting," Mira decided. "It's our primary evidence." They carefully removed the canvas from the easel, planning to take it to the police station. But as they reached the attic door, Vivian appeared, blocking their path. "Going somewhere with Mother's painting?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. "We're taking it to be properly framed," Robert lied. Vivian's eyes narrowed. "In the middle of the task?" "I don't think so." She stepped closer, noticing the bandage on Myra's arm. "Nasty cut you've got there. You really should be more careful in the dark." The implication hung in the air. It had been Vivian in the attic during the storm. "Let us pass, Viv," Robert demanded. "Not with that." She nodded at the painting. "Mother's final portrait stays in this house." "This isn't just a portrait," Mira said boldly. "It's evidence. We know about the digitalis, Vivian. We know about the stolen sapphires and the Swiss bank account." Vivian's composed facade cracked slightly. "What nonsense are you talking about?" "Mother embedded a poison pill in the painting," Robert said. "We've had it tested." "That's absurd." "Is it?" Mira challenged. "Just like it's absurd that you were in debt from gambling? That you've been stealing family heirlooms to pay those debts? That you killed your mother when she threatened to cut you out of the will?" "You have no proof," Vivian hissed, but her hand moved to her earring, the same sapphire captured in the portrait. "The painting is the proof," Mira replied. "Your mother was smarter than you gave her credit for. She documented everything, the theft, the poison. She knew you were killing her, and she left evidence that only I would find." Something dangerous flashed in Vivian's eyes. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small revolver. "Put the painting down," she ordered. Robert stepped in front of Mira. "Vivian, think about what you're doing." "I've thought about nothing else for months," she snapped. "Do you have any idea what it's like watching Mother favor everyone else? She was going to leave everything to her precious foundation. I spent my entire life being the perfect Sullivan daughter, and for what?" "So you poisoned her," Robert said quietly. "I helped her along," Vivian corrected, gun still raised. "She was dying anyway. I just accelerated the process." "And now you're going to shoot us?" Mira asked. "How will you explain that?" "Home invasion," Vivian said simply. "This old house, so vulnerable. 2 intruders broke in. I defended myself. Eleanor will back me up." "Eleanor knows?" Robert looked stunned. "Eleanor suspects, which is enough. She's always been practical." Vivian gestured with the gun. "The painting." Now, instead of handing it over, Mira suddenly thrust the canvas forward toward Vivian's face. The woman recoiled, firing wildly as the heavy frame hit her. Robert lunged, grabbing for the gun. The 3 of them crashed to the floor in a chaotic struggle. When it was over, Vivian lay unconscious, the gun safely in Robert's possession. The bullet had lodged in the ceiling beam. "Call the police," Mira gasped, clutching the painting which had miraculously survived the scuffle. As sirens approached in the distance, Mira examined the portrait. In the struggle, some of the wet paint had smeared, but the key evidence remained intact. Cecilia's hand still pointed accusingly at Vivian's sapphire earrings. The Swiss coordinates were still visible in the background pattern, and most importantly, there was still a small indentation where the poison pill had been embedded. The canvas had spoken. And finally, someone had listened. The Sullivan mansion swarmed with police officers and forensic technicians. Yellow crime scene tape cordoned off the grand staircase while investigators dusted for fingerprints and collected evidence. In the library, Detective Morgan, a stern woman with intelligent eyes, interviewed Mira for the third time. "Walk me through it again," she requested, notebook open. "How did you first suspect Mrs. Sullivan had been murdered?" Mira explained about the journals, the flash drive, and the strange stipulation in the will that had brought her here in the first place. "So you believe Cecilia Sullivan knew she was being poisoned and set up this elaborate scheme to expose her killer?" Detective Morgan's tone was skeptical. "I know how it sounds," Mira admitted. "But Cecilia was methodical and observant. The evidence is all there. In her journals, in the painting, in the Swiss bank records we're trying to access." Across the room, Robert was speaking with another detective, his face drawn with exhaustion and grief. Vivian had been taken into custody, still proclaiming her innocence despite her confession during the confrontation. "And Eleanor Sullivan?" Detective Morgan asked. "What was her involvement?" "I don't know for certain," Mira said carefully. "Vivian suggested Eleanor was aware of what was happening, but I have no proof." As if summoned by her name, Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her normally perfect appearance disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed. "I need to make a statement," she announced. The next hour unraveled decades of Sullivan family secrets. Eleanor confessed she had suspected Vivian was stealing from their mother, but had looked the other way. She admitted to noticing changes in Cecilia's medication routine, but convincing herself it wasn't her business. "I didn't know she was poisoning Mother," Eleanor insisted, tears streaming down her face. "But I knew something was wrong. I should have said something." "Why didn't you?" Detective Morgan pressed. Eleanor's composure crumbled entirely. "Because I was afraid. Vivian has always been the strong one, the one who handled everything. When Mother changed her will, Vivian was furious. She said she'd take care of it. I told myself she meant she'd talk to Mother's lawyers. But you didn't believe that," Mira said quietly. Eleanor shook her head, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "I didn't want to believe anything else." While the police continued their investigation, forensic technicians carefully examined the portrait, now their key piece of evidence. A specialist in art conservation had been called in to document how Cecilia had embedded the pill and encoded other clues in the painting. "It's remarkable," the specialist said, studying the canvas under specialized lighting. "She created a murder board disguised as a family portrait. The technique is extraordinary." By evening, the Swiss bank had confirmed the coordinates, and the painting led to a safety deposit box in Cecilia's name. They were cooperating with international authorities to access its contents. Robert found Mira in the attic, where police had finally finished processing the scene. The portrait had been taken as evidence, leaving the easel empty, a visual reminder of all that had happened. "All these years," he said, his voice hollow, "I never really knew my family at all." Mira took his hand. "Your mother knew you. She trusted you would find the truth." "No," Robert corrected gently. "She trusted you would find it. I was too blind to see what was happening right in front of me." He looked around the attic studio. "She created all this to communicate with you, artist to artist. She knew you'd understand what others wouldn't see." That night, as the police finally cleared out of the mansion, leaving just a single officer stationed outside, Mira couldn't sleep. Something still bothered her about the case, a loose thread she couldn't quite identify. She went to the attic, hoping the empty space might help her think. As she stood where the portrait had been, she noticed something on the floor, a small key that must have fallen during the struggle with Vivian. It matched the lock on Cecilia's jewelry box, which the police had already examined and found empty. On a hunch, Mira examined the jewelry box again, running her fingers along the inner lining. She felt a slight ridge, a false bottom. The key unlocked a hidden compartment containing a single USB drive and a handwritten note. The final piece. From Myra's eyes only. Heart racing, Mira plugged the drive into her laptop. It contained a video of Cecilia Sullivan, looking directly into the camera. "Mira, if you're watching this, you've solved the puzzle I left for you. The portrait is important, but it's only part of the truth. There's something else you need to know." Cecilia explained that years ago, when Vivian was just 17, there had been an accident. Vivian had been driving recklessly and hit a pedestrian, a young artist who later died from his injuries. Cecilia had covered it up to protect her daughter, using the family's influence to make the case disappear. I've carried that guilt for decades, Cecilia continued. I told myself I was protecting my child, but in truth, I created the monster who would eventually try to kill me. By shielding Vivian from consequences, I taught her she was above the law. Tears streamed down Myra's face as she watched. The irony isn't lost on me, Cecilia's recorded image said with a sad smile. That I'm now using art, the very thing Vivian took from that young man, to bring her to justice. Complete the portrait, Mira. But know that its purpose was never just to expose a murder. It was my atonement, and perhaps, in some small way, justice for that young artist whose future was stolen. The video ended, leaving Mira sitting in stunned silence. The case had just become more complicated and more tragic. At dawn, she called Detective Morgan and handed over the USB drive. This changes things, the detective said after viewing the video. It establishes a pattern of behavior going back decades. What happens now? Mira asked. Now we reopen a very cold case, Detective Morgan replied, and make sure justice is finally served for everyone. Outside the mansion windows, rain began to fall again, washing away the last of the police tape. The storm that had begun with Cecilia's death was far from over, but for the first time, Mira could see clear sky on the horizon. 3 months after Vivian Sullivan's arrest, the courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. The trial had captured national attention. A wealthy socialite accused of murdering her mother, a decades-old hit-and-run resurrected from the past, and at the center of it all, a painting that had become the prosecution's star evidence. Mira stood at the back of the courtroom as the verdict was read. On the count of first-degree murder in the death of Cecilia Sullivan, we find the defendant, Vivian Sullivan, guilty. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Eleanor sobbed quietly in the front row while Robert squeezed Myra's hand so tightly it hurt. Vivian showed no reaction, her face a perfect mask until the very end. Outside, in the harsh glare of camera lights, reporters thrust microphones toward Mira. Mrs. Sullivan, how does it feel to have solved your mother-in-law's murder through art? The painting wasn't my creation, Mira replied quietly. It was Cecilia's final masterpiece. I just helped complete it. Later that evening, Mira stood in the Sullivan Mansion's grand foyer. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if secrets held in its walls for generations had finally been released. Mr. Whitman, the family attorney, adjusted his glasses as he reviewed the finalized will. With the 90-day period complete and the portrait finished, I can now execute Mrs. Sullivan's final wishes, he announced to the small gathering that included Robert, Eleanor, Mrs. Abernathy, and Mira. The Sullivan Mansion and 30% of the estate will go to the Sullivan Foundation for the Arts, with a special provision establishing a scholarship for young artists in need. Eleanor nodded silently, no longer the brittle, judgmental woman she had been. The trial had broken something in her, but perhaps also freed her from Vivian's influence. 20% to Eleanor Sullivan, Mr. Whitman continued, with the stipulation that she serve on the foundation's board of directors. I'll do my best to honor Mother's legacy, Eleanor said softly. 20% to Robert Sullivan. Robert squeezed Myra's hand. And the remaining 30%, along with the contents of the attic studio, to Mira Sullivan, with the instruction that she use her talents to continue what Cecilia started. Mira blinked in surprise. What Cecilia started? What does that mean? Mr. Whitman handed her an envelope, one final message from beyond. Mira, my dear, by now the truth has been revealed and justice served. What began as my atonement can become your beginning. The attic studio is yours, along with my family's art collection. Some pieces have questionable provenance, as you now know. Use your portion of the inheritance to right these old wrongs, return what was taken, celebrate what was created. Art should heal, not harm. It should reveal truth, not conceal it. You understood my final portrait when my own children could not. Now create your own masterpieces. 1 week later, the portrait was returned from evidence. By unanimous decision, it was donated to the National Gallery, where it drew record crowds. Art critics praised its technical brilliance and emotional depth. Law students studied it as an unprecedented form of evidence, and tourists simply marveled at the story behind it, how an artist had solved her own murder from beyond the grave. Mira established her studio in the mansion's attic, though she and Robert had chosen to live in their modest apartment in town. The Sullivan Foundation headquarters occupied the main floor, while Eleanor took a small cottage on the property, slowly rebuilding her life away from Vivian's shadow. The Foundation's first act was to trace the provenance of the Sullivan art collection. Several pieces were returned to families who had lost them during wartime. Others were authenticated and properly attributed to their true creators. Each restitution was a step toward healing the legacy Cecilia had left behind. On a crisp autumn evening, Mira stood before a blank canvas in the attic studio. Sunset streamed through the skylights, bathing the room in golden light. She could almost feel Cecilia's presence as she lifted her brush. The portrait she was beginning would not reveal a murder or expose a secret. Instead, it would tell a different story, one of redemption, of a family broken by greed and deception but slowly finding its way toward truth. Mrs. Abernathy appeared at the door with tea, just as she had done for Cecilia for decades. "You brought life back to this old house," the housekeeper observed. "I'm just continuing what Cecilia started," Mira replied. "She would be proud." Mrs. Abernathy paused, then added, "She saw herself in you, you know. Not just your talent, but your heart." Mira nodded, thinking of the quiet art teacher who had arrived at the mansion 90 days ago. Invisible, uncertain, easily dismissed. That woman was gone now. In her place stood an artist who had learned that her greatest strength wasn't technical skill or training, but her ability to see what others missed, the subtle details, the hidden meanings, the truth beneath the surface. As she began to paint, Mira remembered something Cecilia had written in her final journal. Art at its most powerful is never just decoration. It is testimony. It speaks when we cannot. It remains when we are gone. And in the right hands, it can bring light to even the darkest corners of our lives. Outside the attic window, the Sullivan estate stretched toward the horizon, no longer a mansion hiding dark secrets, but a place of creativity and renewal. The portrait that had begun as Cecilia's final act of justice was now the first chapter of a new story. Mira dipped her brush into vibrant blue paint and made her first bold stroke across the canvas. Her mother-in-law had forced her to complete one portrait. Now, by choice, she would create countless more, each one a masterpiece of truth. Was justice really served in the end? Or did something still feel unfinished? Let me know below. And if you're hooked on stories with secrets, twists, and powerful reveals, keep watching the next story.